Now available in paperback and e-readers. John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s in this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Get your copy of John Haynes 1987 in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Former President Jimmy Carter passed away yesterday at 100 years old. Now, Jimmy Carter sadly passed away after a 2-year battle with melanoma, where he was admitted into hospice care, and after being admitted into this hospice care for the last 2 years, he wound up sadly passing away after his 100th birthday. Now, Jimmy Carter, as related to his term in the White House, will always be remembered as a president who basically wound up maintaining the integrity of the United States and its Constitution in the aftermath of the scandal of former President Richard Nixon, who wound up resigning from office after the Watergate scandal exposed him and everything that he did as related to his actions as related to that scandal. Now, in the aftermath of the Watergate scandal, the integrity of the United States was in a very, very shaky place because America was dealing with many crises such as the issues as related to the Vietnam War, which basically divided the country as people were fighting for so-called democracy in other countries, and this basically destabilized America as related to its whole integrity as related to its national platform, and led to a big divide between baby boomer kids and their parents as related to the Vietnam War. Not to mention there were other issues that were going on as related to the state of America's economy at the time, where we were having a lot of inflation going on. And as this inflation was going on, we had issues with other crises as related to the energy crisis, which was partially created due to Arab oil embargoes. So it was a very tumultuous period here in America before Jimmy Carter ran for office. And Jimmy Carter basically was the man who was the one who restored integrity to the United States as related to the state of the Union and the overall state of the Constitution. Because as the first president to be elected in the aftermath of the appointment of Gerald Ford, who was not, again, a president who any Americans voted for, he restored integrity to the whole electoral process and was the right man for the job, because Jimmy Carter, even though his presidency was a bit of a disaster, was good at one thing, and that was having character and integrity as related to his overall content of his character. Now, Jimmy Carter basically was a humble peanut farmer, as he said himself, who basically went from a peanut farmer to going out here and going into the military. He served during World War II, and as he served in World War II, he went out here and then eventually went, after the military, again into, I think after his naval career, went into farming. And then after he went into farming, he then started entering into politics, becoming Georgia State Senator from 1963 to 1967, and then went on campaigns to run for governor, eventually winding up becoming the governor of Georgia in 1971, and served one term as the governor of Georgia before he decided to enter into the presidential campaign of 1976. Now, in 1976, Jimmy Carter ran for president and was considered to be an underdog, by many people because his name really wasn't that well known. However, what happened with Jimmy Carter was he was a guy who was known for his Christian values known for his character and his integrity, and this was something that resonated with Americans in the aftermath of dealing with Richard Nixon and all of his dishonesty, and Gerald Ford basically being a beta male who nobody really respected. And what Jimmy Carter presented was this image of integrity and character as a man, and his character as a man basically showed as related to the way he presented himself, and that's what people respected about Jimmy Carter. They really respected Jimmy Carter because he presented that face of integrity and had a lot of big plans for his first term of office. He really wanted to do the right thing and do right by Americans. Unfortunately, he was president during a very tumultuous time in American history, and as a president during a tumultuous time in American history, he was basically dealing with so many crises as related to the Vietnam War and draft evaders, which he dealt with by pardoning all those individuals. But the other things he was dealing with was the economic recession caused by inflation and dealing with an energy crisis where people were not able to get any sort of gas. The entire economy was in a malaise, as they called it, again, bogged down by things like the CAFE requirements, which basically led to a generation of underpowered cars and led to things as related to preserving fuel efficiency that basically alienated a lot of people as related to buying American cars, not to mention a lot of inflation caused by, again, an economy that had basically stagnated. And he really had a hard time dealing with a Congress, which basically led to, again, the first government shutdown in 1980. And he had a lot of things as related to diplomatic situations he had to deal with, such as the conflicts in the Middle East, things like the whole thing with the Cold War, which was escalated, sadly, by him, and the whole Iran hostage crisis. Jimmy Carter had to deal with a lot as related to his term that basically led to him being one of the worst presidents in U.S. history because the entire nation was in a very tumultuous period. It was in a very tumultuous period, but he was trying to navigate a course as related to the country that had been in a bad place all throughout, because the entire 1970s was a very rough period. It was a rough period coming out of the prosperity of the 1960s. The country was basically put into a decline by Lyndon Johnson's whole, I believe, after the Kennedy assassination and Lyndon Johnson's escalation of the Vietnam War that basically, again, divided the country, which led to the election of Richard Nixon, and then Richard Nixon's lack of character as related to Watergate further alienated Americans, creating, again, great divides. And Jimmy Carter will always be remembered for the person who was the glue who held America together as related to integrity, and he maintained his integrity after his presidency by going out after he lost the election in 1980 to Ronald Reagan. After he wound up losing the election to Ronald Reagan, he wound up going out here and looking to maintain things as related to his integrity, and again, going out here doing things like building Habitat for Humanity, maintaining his Christian missions and things all around. I mean, Jimmy Carter did a lot for people as related to life after the presidency, and a lot of people don't know that he was still doing a lot as when he was president. I mean, he bailed out Chrysler. Chrysler was this close to going out of business due to the dysfunctional CAFE requirements and their uninspired design for their Dodge, Chrysler, and Plymouth cars. But Jimmy Carter, again, he did a lot that people don't really see because he did a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Now, he did, again, make a lot of mistakes with foreign policy as related to things but he tried his best to, again, maintain integrity because things could have got a lot worse if he hadn't did anything. I mean, he was a president in a period of a lot of crises and in a very crucial period that, again, kept the U.S. from being destabilized. If it wasn't really for Jimmy Carter, the country would have been in a more destabilized place because we had, again, a lot of baby boomers angry about the Vietnam War. We had an economy that was in turmoil due to, again, government bureaucracy stuff. Again, I'll repeat it once more, the CAFE requirements that choked American engines from the performance of the 1960s that led to, again, the decline of Chrysler, which was already on a decline anyway because of their uninspired design. But the whole thing is, he basically was the glue that held the country together in the aftermath of all of these scandals and all of this global chaos. I mean, this is what Jimmy Carter will be remembered for as the 39th president, but he will also be remembered for all of his, again, humanitarian efforts. I mean, Jimmy Carter did a lot for people as related to humanitarian efforts, continuing to be a diplomat behind the scenes, continuing to try to help people out, and later on went out here and looked to, again, help out the average everyday American, looked to help out the average everyday American as related to things like all of his different work in things like Habitat for Humanity. And as he was doing this, he was still a great father to all of his children and his wife of 77 years. I mean, Jimmy Carter was what I would consider to be a good man, and a good man in a bad situation. That's how I always saw Jimmy Carter's presidency. He was a good man in a bad situation, in a bad place. But he managed to, again, maintain his integrity, continue to maintain his integrity even throughout things, continue to go out here and look to maintain his integrity even after he was a president. And again, it's his character that he will always be remembered for during that tumultuous time in American history. In American history, he will always be remembered as a man who maintained his integrity and his character. And that's one of the things I respected about Jimmy Carter as related to his internal character. He was a good man, again, at the right time to deal with a bad situation in American history, because things could have exploded in this country far worse as related to the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. This is the kind of thing that leads to coups and overthrows in other countries. But Jimmy Carter's election showed that our integrity as a nation, the state of our union, basically could be preserved. And that's where I see Jimmy Carter's as his place in history. Now, as he got older, he still continued to persevere until about 2 years ago when he wound up in hospice care. He put himself in hospice care as related to the melanoma he was dealing with. And as he was dealing with this melanoma, he dealt with it with dignity and grace. Again, a man of great character who continued to maintain his character. And he celebrated his 100th birthday. And after celebrating his 100th birthday, he wound up sadly passing yesterday. Jimmy Carter wound up passing, being the longest living president given all these years, blessed by these years with God. God blessed this man with all these years of life because he lived to live the abundant life that Christ wanted him to live. He lived to meet the standards of God, and he'll be respected for that. Again, respected for that because he was looking to live to God's standard. And that's one of the things I remember about Jimmy Carter, along with him being the first president I actually remembered as a boy, because I was born in 1973, and Jimmy Carter was the first president that I ever remembered as related to my childhood. Not that much that I could remember, but I could remember he was the first president of my childhood. And he was the first president. I remember people saying good things about him in spite of the State of the Union in the late 70s. I remember people saying good things about him as related to his character. And that's the thing that Jimmy Carter will always be remembered as related to his legacy. He will be remembered for being a man who served God, a man who had great integrity, a man who followed God, a man who had great standards, and a man who, again, stood by things as related to his character. And while he wasn't the greatest president, he was a good man at the right time for the U.S., a good man at the right time for the United States, and a good man who kept the United States from falling into chaos. I mean, Jimmy Carter's legacy, they don't really appreciate what this man had done was to the country. They don't appreciate what he presented as related to representing this country, and he basically got us through a major crisis and allowed us to enter into a period of prosperity under Ronald Reagan, where America did go on even in spite of all the crises going on in the 1970s. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam: The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam: The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.